Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're tackling something that sounds a little boring at first, but I promise it's actually super interesting. Fintech banking licenses.
Oh, yeah.
I know, but think about it. Imagine you have this awesome startup idea. You're going to change how we bank forever, right? You're ready to take on the big guys. But there's one big problem. You need a license.
Right.
And getting one, it's like trying to solve a puzzle. Blindfolded.
Yeah.
So to figure this all out, we've got a bunch of articles from Tech Bullion. We're going to try to figure out what exactly are these licenses, why are they such a big deal, and what crazy hoops do these fintech companies have to jump through.
It's wild out there.
Oh, and we're going to look at some real companies that have not just survived this whole process, but totally crushed it. Names you'll recognize. Revolut, TransferWise, N26.
Those are some big names for sure.
And get this, we're talking billions. Yes, billions of dollars in compliance costs. Luckily, I've got our expert here to help us break it all down.
Yeah. So, you know, what I think is super interesting, fintech, it's not just about apps or, making things look all fancy and modern.
Right.
It's really changing how financial services work.
Yeah.
Like at the core, how you pay for your coffee, to how you invest your money, it's touching everything.
And this isn't just some slow change. This feels like it's happening really, really fast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Technology and consumer expectations, they're driving this. Like on the tech side, you've got AI and blockchain.
Right.
Super powerful, changing everything.
Yeah.
And then you've got, millennials and Gen Z, right? They grew up with the internet.
You expect everything to be instant.
Yeah. Digital, instant, seamless, all of it.
Yeah. So we've got this revolution happening. Why are these licenses so important in all of this? I mean, I get following the rules, but it seems like there's more to it.
For sure. So licenses, they're like the key. They let fintechs go from just offering like small services to being actual financial institutions.
So it's about like legitimacy, right? It's saying, hey, we're not just some random company. We're the real deal.
Exactly. And that means trust, which is super important in finance, right? You're trusting them with your money.
Huge.
So knowing they're regulated makes a big difference.
Right.
And, it's interesting to see how these banking regulations are changing too, trying to keep up with how fast this industry is moving.
Makes sense. So, okay, licenses are the golden ticket. But I'm guessing there's not just one type of license, right?
No, not at all. It's a whole jungle out there.
Yeah, it's finance. Gotta be complicated.
You've got your full banking licenses. Those are the big ones.
Yeah.
They let you do everything a regular bank does.
Makes sense.
Then there are specialized licenses for companies that just want to focus on certain things, like lending or cryptocurrency.
Right. Not everyone's trying to be the next JP Morgan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there are electronic money institution licenses, or EMIs.
EMIs.
Those are for companies that deal with electronic money and payments, like, Venmo, PayPal.
Got it. So different licenses for different players.
Yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing at all.
And I'm betting it gets even trickier when you think about, like, the global picture, right? Laws are different everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. The global regulatory landscape is, it's a puzzle for sure. What works in one country might be totally illegal in another.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the UK is really serious about consumer protection and cracking down on money laundering. They have really strict rules.
So if you're a fintech in the UK, you better have your compliance game on point.
You better. And then you've got the EU, where data privacy is huge, and cross-border services. They've got GDPR and other regulations all about protecting your data.
Okay.
And then there's the US. Well, as you might expect, it's a bit more complicated.
The U.S. is always a little different.
You've got state regulations and federal regulations, so it can be tough for fintech companies to navigate all of that.
Sounds like a headache just thinking about it. So who's actually in charge of all this? Who decides about these licenses?
Well, the central banks, they're often the ones calling the shots. They're usually responsible for actually issuing those licenses.
Okay.
Then there are these specific regulatory bodies, like the FCA in the UK, the Financial Conduct Authority.
Okay.
And in the EU, the European Banking Authority, or the EBA.
All right.
These guys, they set the rules, they watch to see if companies are following them, and they can really come down hard on companies that aren't playing by the book.
So fintechs can't just, do whatever they want.
Nope, they've got to be on top of it.
And that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah, it definitely can.
I'm sensing a but coming.
Well, it's not just that these regulations are complicated, they change all the time. What's okay today might not be okay tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
Fintechs might need several different licenses, depending on what they offer and where they operate.
Yeah.
And then there's the paperwork.
Oh,
so much paperwork. And reporting, it's a full-time job, just staying on top of everything.
And that's where those compliance costs, those billions of dollars come in, right?
Yeah, it's not just the fees, it's having the people and the systems to handle all of this.
And all of this is happening while they're trying to compete with these giant traditional banks. The ones that have been around forever and have tons of resources.
Oh yeah, it's a real David and Goliath situation.
But despite all of that, there are some amazing opportunities for these fintech companies.
For sure.
So let's talk about that. What makes it all worth it?
So if a fintech can successfully navigate all of this, they could reach so many customers, especially those tech-savvy millennials and Gen Z folks.
Right.
They can offer way more services too, really push the boundaries.
So it's not just about surviving, it's about huge growth potential.
Yeah, and disrupting the whole industry.
Honestly, hearing about all these challenges, it's a bit intimidating. Does anyone actually make it through all of this?
I get it, it can seem daunting, but that's why it's so cool to see these companies that haven't just survived, they've thrived.
Give us some hope here, some examples.
Well, like Revolut, they've gotten licensed in multiple places, and they offer all kinds of services.
Wow.
They're a major player in the fintech world.
That's impressive. So it can be done. Any other examples?
Another good one is TransferWise, which is now called Wise. They built their reputation on being transparent and following the rules, and that really worked for them.
So they basically turned compliance into a marketing strategy.
Exactly. And then there's N26. They use these things called regulatory sandboxes.
Okay, regulatory sandboxes.
Yeah, to test out new stuff safely before going public.
I'm going to need you to explain those.
Yeah, of course. They're like these controlled environments where fintechs can experiment under the supervision of the regulators.
So a training ground where everyone wins.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows the regulators that you're serious about doing things right.
So all these companies, Revolut, Wise, N26, they've all shown some really important best practices for this whole licensing process.
They have.
So let's break those down. What can other companies learn from their success?
The biggest thing is talk to the regulators early and often.
Don't wait until you're ready to apply.
Nope. The earlier, the better. Build that relationship, understand what they expect,
So it's more like a partnership, not like us versus them.
Exactly. Another thing is adaptability. The rules change constantly.
Yeah.
So you have to be flexible and willing to adjust.
Got it. What works today might not work tomorrow.
Exactly. And don't underestimate working with those traditional institutions.
Oh, interesting.
And have the experience, the connections, it can be really valuable.
So it's not always about fighting the old way of doing things. Sometimes it's about finding ways to work together.
For sure. And it brings up another big point. Compliance is crucial. It's not just about avoiding fines. It's about building a trustworthy business.
That's a really good point. Okay, so we've gone from what even is fintech to this crazy world of licenses to these companies that are rocking it.
It's a wild ride.
But I have a feeling this is just the beginning.
Oh yeah, we've got so much more to dig into.
All right, well, let's keep diving. We'll be right back after a quick break.
All right, so before the break, we were talking about these fintech rock stars. They got their banking licenses and just took off. But, for every success story, there are tons of companies that are just trying to, understand the rules.
Yeah, it can be super overwhelming.
So let's break down some of these key regulatory areas, the ones that can really make or break a fintech company.
Okay, let's get into it. What are the biggest hurdles, regulation-wise?
Well, first you've got the whole registration and licensing process. Like we talked about, this isn't a quick and easy thing.
Right, not just a trip to the DMV.
It's a long road.
Yeah.
Different licenses for everything, different services, different places.
So it's choose your own adventure, but way more paperwork.
Exactly. And every country has its own rules. So fintechs have to be ready for anything, sometimes in multiple countries at once.
So you don't just, get the license and you're done.
No. It's like a garden. You got to keep tending to it.
Okay.
Regulations change all the time, so companies need to stay updated. Update their systems, sometimes even restructure their whole business.
That sounds like you need a whole team, not just a quick Google search.
You really do. A dedicated compliance team is a must-have for any serious fintech company.
Right.
These are the people making sure you're following the rules today and ready for whatever comes next.
So registration, licensing, that's step one. What other regulatory minefields are out there?
Consumer protection is huge. Regulators everywhere are focused on making sure fintechs are treating their customers fairly.
Right. It's people's money and data we're talking about.
Exactly. This is real people's lives,
Yeah.
right? So they want clear information about fees, strong data protection, good systems for handling complaints.
It's about building a company people can trust.
That's the core of it. Trust is everything in fintech. And regulators are making sure these companies deserve that trust.
And all those acronyms we always hear, like KYC and AML, those are part of this, right?
For sure. Know your customer and anti-money laundering, those are key.
So fintechs need to prove they know who their customers are and what they're doing.
Yep. It's about stopping money laundering, terrorist financing, fraud, all that. That means checking identities, doing risk assessments, reporting anything suspicious.
It's not just about, like, making a cool app. It's about being responsible.
Couldn't said it better myself. And of course, there's data privacy and security.
Right. Fintech companies have so much data, right?
Tons of it. Spending habits, personal info, everything.
Yeah.
They need to be super careful about how they handle it and protect it.
Especially with all the data breaches we hear about all the time. It feels like it's not if, but when for a lot of companies.
Unfortunately, yeah. That's why regulations like GDPR in Europe are so important. CCPA in California, too.
Yeah.
They set strict rules about what you can collect, how you use it, who you share it with, all that. And they give people more control over their own information.
So fintechs need to be thinking about this from the very beginning.
100%. It's not something you add on later.
Okay.
It needs to be part of everything you do.
Wow, this is a lot. Sounds like a minefield out there. Are there any, like, strategies companies can use to navigate all this?
For sure. The best advice I can give is talk to regulators early and often.
Don't wait till you're ready to apply for the license.
Ooh, the sooner the better. Build a relationship, understand their concerns, get feedback.
Some more partnership, less like trying to trick them.
Exactly. Another thing are these regulatory sandboxes we talked about.
Oh, yeah, the safe spaces.
Yeah. You get to test new products and services, but with the regulators watching.
So less risk.
Exactly. It's a lower risk for the company, and the regulators can see what you're doing and give feedback. Yeah. It also shows you're serious about compliance.
Okay, so we've got talking to the regulators, the sandboxes. What about using tech to help with all this?
Well, that's where RegTech comes in.
RegTech.
Regulatory technology. It's all about using tech to streamline all those compliance tasks.
So less paperwork.
Exactly. RegTech can help with KYC, AML, data privacy, reporting, all that stuff.
So it saves time, money, and maybe less mistakes, too?
Right. It's a game changer.
Okay, so talk to regulators, sandboxes, RegTech. Any other advice for companies climbing this compliance mountain?
Building a culture of compliance within the company is super important. It can't just be the legal team's problem.
So everyone from the top down needs to be on board.
Exactly. Compliance needs to be part of every decision.
Okay.
Every process, every product. It's got to be part of the company's DNA.
That's a challenge, but also a way to stand out, right?
For sure. Companies that do this from the start, they build trust.
Yeah.
With customers, with regulators, with investors.
Good art.
Just good business.
So we've covered a lot, from what these regulations are to how companies can actually succeed. But I'm curious about, like, the bigger picture. What trends are shaping the future of these fintech banking licenses?
Well, one of the biggest trends is open banking legislation.
Okay.
Countries are starting to require banks to share customer data with other companies.
Wait, really?
Yeah, with the customer's permission, of course.
So it's about giving people more control over their data.
Exactly. Open banking is shaking things up. It's creating opportunities for fintechs to develop new products and services.
Like what?
Imagine being able to see all your accounts from different banks in one app.
That would be amazing.
Right. Get a complete picture of your finances.
Yeah, that would be so helpful.
But it also creates new challenges for regulators.
Oh, I bet.
It's a more complex system now, so they have to make sure everything is secure, private, fair.
So more innovation, more headaches for a regulator.
Pretty much. Another trend is central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs.
CBDCs?
Yeah, it's like digital cash issued by the government.
Okay, that's interesting. What's the big deal?
Well, they could change how we pay for things completely. Faster, cheaper, more secure transactions. And it could help people who don't have access to banks get financial services.
So a lot of potential benefits.
Huge potential. But for regulators, it's a whole new world. They're still figuring out how to handle it.
So open banking, CBDCs, anything else?
We definitely need more global cooperation on regulations.
Makes sense as these companies become more global.
Yeah, you don't want companies just shopping around for the easiest rules.
Right.
We need everyone on the same page, especially for things like money laundering and data privacy.
So it's not just about individual countries anymore. It's about working together.
Exactly. And we can't forget about financial inclusion.
Okay.
Fintech can help people who haven't had access to financial services before.
Right, like people without bank accounts.
Exactly.
Right.
Mobile banking in remote areas, microloans for small businesses.
That's amazing.
Fintech can make a real difference in the world.
It really can. But even with all that, getting a banking license is still a massive challenge.
It is. It takes a lot of work and resources.
Yeah.
But the rewards can be huge, as we've seen.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, the opportunities, the trends, and some inspiring companies. I think it's time to go back to those success stories and really dig in.
That's good to me. Let's take a closer look at how they did it.
All right, let's start with Revolut. How did they become such a powerhouse? All right, so we're back and ready to unpack Revolut's journey to fintech stardom. How did they go from a small startup to a global force?
Their story's pretty amazing, actually. They started in 2015, just as a prepaid card provider.
Like the kind you'd use for traveling.
Exactly. But they wanted to do so much more. They had this vision of changing the whole banking industry.
Ambitious. So how did they go from prepaid cards to taking on the big banks?
They realized that to compete at that level, they needed a banking license.
Makes sense.
So they were strategic about it. They focused on certain markets and made sure their applications fit the rules in each place.
So instead of trying to do everything at once, they picked their battles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
First, they got an EMI license in the UK,
Okay.
which let them offer some basic banking services. Then they targeted Lithuania, and they managed to get a full banking license there,
Wow.
which opened up even more possibilities for them.
So they kind of use a stepping stone approach, starting small and working their way up.
It's a smart strategy,
Yeah.
especially for fintechs that want to go global.
Yeah.
They get to test things out, learn about different regulations, and build a good track record.
So it's not just about growing fast, it's about showing they can handle the responsibility that comes with a license.
For sure. But Revolut didn't just play it safe, They weren't afraid to push the boundaries and challenge the way things were done.
I bet that got the attention of the regulator.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Sometimes they were under more scrutiny because of it.
Makes sense.
But that willingness to innovate and challenge the traditional banking system is a big reason they've been so successful.
So it's a balance, right? Pushing the limits, but also staying within the rules.
Absolutely. It's a delicate dance. And Revolut's journey shows that it's not always smooth sailing.
There are going to be some bumps.
For sure. What matters is how you deal with them.
So how did Revolut handle those regulatory roadblocks?
They were always willing to talk to the regulators, address their concerns, even change how they did things if they had to.
Yeah.
They understood that building those relationships with regulators is crucial in the long run.
There's that proactive communication again.
It's so important. You can't just ignore the rules. You have to be involved.
Right. Understand what's expected and be ready to adapt.
Exactly. So Revolut is a great example of a company that found that balance between innovation and compliance.
They make it look easy, but I'm sure it wasn't.
Not at all.
Yeah.
What other success stories come to mind?
Well, we talked about Wise, formerly TransferWise.
Ah, yes. Wise. They built their whole business on offering cheaper, more transparent international money transfers. They really tapped into what people were frustrated with.
I've used them. It was so much easier and cheaper than using my bank.
Right. And their commitment to compliance is a big part of their success. They didn't try to cut corners or play games with the system. They did things right from the beginning and were always open about how they did things.
So it's not just about disrupting the industry, it's about doing it the right way. Wise made compliance a strength, not a weakness.
Exactly. They saw that compliance isn't just a cost, it's a way to build trust and stand out from the crowd.
It shows you can be innovative and have integrity.
Absolutely. And they were smart about getting licenses, focused on key markets first, like the UK and Europe, then expanded globally.
There's that stepping stone approach again.
It works. Start small, build a solid base, then grow strategically. Wise is proof that this can lead to amazing global growth.
Their story is really inspiring. Any other fintech stars we should learn from?
Well, N26 is really interesting. They're a German neobank, so everything's online, no physical branches.
I've heard of them.
They've really embraced the whole digital banking concept.
Yeah, it seems like they're popular with younger people who do everything on their phones.
They are. And they've been great at using tech to create a really smooth, easy banking experience. But what's especially interesting is their approach to regulation. They were early adopters of those regulatory sandboxes we talked about.
Oh, right, the testing grounds.
Yep. They used them to try out new products and services in a controlled environment with guidance from the regulators.
So they got feedback and reduced risk, all while showing they were committed to compliance.
Exactly. It's such a smart strategy for getting ahead of potential problems.
It seems like N26 really prioritized collaboration with regulators.
They did. They realized early on that working together is key to long-term success. And it's paid off big time. They've grown rapidly and now operate in many countries across Europe and the US.
So they're not just surviving, they're thriving.
For sure. It shows that compliance is more than just avoiding fines.
It's about building a strong, lasting business that people can trust.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So we've covered a lot of ground today, from the challenges to the opportunities in this world of fintech banking licenses.
Yeah, we've seen how companies like Revolut, Wise, and N26 have not only figured out the regulatory maze, but they've used it to their advantage. What are the key takeaways here? What should our listeners be thinking about?
I think the biggest thing is that fintech is here to stay. It's not a trend, it's a fundamental change in how we think about and interact with financial services.
And as fintech becomes more and more common, the need for clear and adaptable regulation is only going to get stronger.
Absolutely. We need rules that can keep up with innovation while also ensuring stability, protecting consumers, and making sure everyone plays by the same rules.
It's a tough balance, but it's crucial for the whole industry.
I agree. And I think we'll see more and more cooperation between regulators, especially as fintech companies operate across borders. Imagine a world where a company can get licensed in one country and then easily operate in others.
That would be amazing.
It would simplify things so much and make things fairer for everyone.
So looking ahead, what's the main message when it comes to fintech banking licenses?
I'd say embrace compliance, work with the regulators, and never stop innovating.
Great advice. Well, on that note, it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've explored a lot, and hopefully you've learned something new about this fascinating world of fintech banking licenses. Don't forget to check out the show notes for more information on everything we talked about today. Until next time, keep diving deep.